Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Transform Your Practice, Transform Your Life. My name is Kristina Schneider and I'm a practice success coach here at the Ultimate Estate Planner. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to tune in to today's episode. Today's episode is specific to the estate planning practice, although I would say, again, another really good topic that probably applies to multiple businesses, but it is the three most commonly overlooked roles in most estate planning law firms. And like I said, I think that this particular program and episode is going to have applicability across the board. And so let me start with role number one. First and foremost, an office manager or some kind of director of operations. A lot of law firms do not have somebody in this role, but I will tell you that a lot of people do have someone that does some of the tasks that may be tied to this role. You might be even thinking to yourself, man, I have somebody. It may be a paralegal, it may be an executive assistant or assistant of some kind. It may be even an attorney that's essentially functioning in this way of some sort. Our director of operations for our affiliated law firm is someone that has been tasked with being responsible for obviously things like HR and bookkeeping. And she is not the actual bookkeeper, but she coordinates efforts with a qualified outside contract bookkeeper. But the other thing, and probably the most important thing that she's been tasked with, is to oversee the operations and the health of the law firm. What do I mean by that? She is constantly looking at, are they properly staffed? Does the staff have all the resources they need to get their job done? Is the calendar filled up in order for us to generate revenue? What is the revenue today, this week, this month? How are we doing towards our revenue goals? How are we doing towards our budgetary goals, right? These are all these financial metrics and really oversight of the law practice that a lot of law firms lack. I just had a consulting session earlier this week with an attorney who just, gets to the end of the month and is hoping she's not writing red, right? That is not a place that we want to be in. But again, these are the things that unfortunately, law school did not teach us. It is stuff that I'm learning in my own MBA studies of how and what is needed to run a successful practice. And absolutely every law firm, every business needs this. They need to understand, how do you generate revenue in the practice? And do we have on the docket, if you will, whether it's, are you doing hourly billing or you're filling up your calendar with appointments that will generate revenue? Do you have what it means right now, currently in the queue in order to meet your financial revenue goals? And so that is essentially the role of an office manager, director of operations. Just a bonus tip here. This is not a role that typically has been successful for estate planning lawyers or any business, I would imagine, to hire from outside. This is simply not a role that is typically, it's unique in your estate planning practice in terms of, I've seen law firms. I know that our own affiliated law firm was guilty of this, of hiring outside office managers with the assumption that they know how to manage an office. They can come in here and start running it well here. And that just simply is not the case. It is very difficult for employees to be able to take direction and even criticism on how to do their job from someone that has zero idea about how to do their job. So what we have found is that this particular position is a fantastic role done by somebody in the practice who's kind of worked their way up. One of the things that I can tell you about our affiliated law firm and their director of operations was that she started working at the law firm over 30 years ago as essentially a receptionist or a file clerk. She started kind of from the ground up and she moved her way up, learned different roles and different positions, and she genuinely understands the operation and how to do everything in the firm so that she can properly manage it. And that is exactly the goal and the role of a director of operations or an office manager. So if you don't have somebody, let's say you have a pretty young staff and they have not been there very long, can you begin just to logically think of, developing somebody into one of those people? This has to be somebody who is organized, who is takes initiative, proactive, able and willing to jump in where necessary. They may not necessarily need to know or need to take on HR functions. It's helpful if they do, but if let's just say they're not necessarily the best at some of those difficult conversations in HR, you can certainly farm out HR functions or take that on with them and kind of do a dual role there. But it is definitely somebody that you want to know that understands your firm's operation and understands the importance of efficiency and profitability. So that's rule number one. Role number two is a little less obvious, but it's having essentially an administrative assistant. We used to call this position a file clerk. This is when we had paper files, a very antiquated law firm a role and title there, right? But it's having an administrative assistant. What I often find in law firms is they've got really high skilled, high level people, such as paralegals, doing a lot of administrative tasks, whether it's answering phones, putting binders together, copying, scanning. They're doing a lot of day-to-day administrative tasks that are better done by I'm going to say less skilled, and I don't mean that in any kind of demeaning way, but someone that maybe is not nearly as skilled in things like drafting documents, and maybe even marketing tasks, right? The other advantage of having this file clerk or administrative assistant position is think of all the times you need coverage. If you have a receptionist, you might need coverage for that receptionist if they go on lunch break, if they're out sick, if they go on vacation, right? It's good to have that backup. It's helpful for you not to utilize the receptionist who needs to be maybe at the front and answering phones for things that might otherwise take them out of their seat, to do copying, scanning, witnessing, and things like that. You have a witness now, right? Our administrative assistant or file clerk role in our affiliated law firm, their role was to primarily be available to do signings during being witness during our signings and execution meetings, right? But one of the things that we do is we provide the binder all assembled and ready to go and all the originals ready to go. And we provide them to the client before they leave after they're signing. And we're able to do that because we have somebody ready on the ground, pretty much with the binders, pretty much at 95% completion. And then once they're finished signing, they're able to finish up that binder within 10, 15 minutes max. And then the clients can walk away with the binders right then and there. I have a whole program on, how to do that and get that set up properly. And so, but it takes having, a body available and ready, tasked with this task to do that. And it's really helpful when you have this position. Think of other things where you might send out someone to go run an errand, go pick up lunches, go pick up office supplies, and go run errands, go down to the court. Is it helpful to have someone like a paralegal doing those things or a receptionist who's otherwise answering the phones and now someone else has got to pick up those? So it becomes a really good floater position. And a really important thing about having a small business and a small practice is there has to be some level of cross training and coverage. Otherwise, you really do risk if someone gets sick, wants to go on vacation, you really risk not having the proper coverage that you need. And then last but not least, another most commonly overlooked role and position, the one I seem to get the most pushback from attorneys, is an executive assistant. If you have never had an executive assistant, you don't know what you're missing. A lot of times people view an executive assistant as a non-revenue producing position that is a waste of money. The pushback I get from attorneys is, I don't even know what they would do for me. And then here, this is what I recommend that they do. And if you don't have an assistant, I'm going to ask you to do the same. Jot down every single thing that you do on a piece of paper. Go ahead, just pause this video, jot it down, jot down every single thing that you do. And then what I would like you to do is put a star on the ones that only you can do. Only you can do because you are an attorney. Only you can do because you are an attorney business owner. Not only you can do because no one else can do it as well as you can do it and do it as fast as you can do it. That's not what I said. Only you can do it because it makes sense for you as the business owner to do it. It makes sense because you are the attorney to do it. And most of the time, most attorneys are doing far too many administrative based tasks that they could delegate easily to an executive assistant. The other thing is that there's other things that they don't even think about or know about that an executive assistant could be doing to make their life easier. Anything from grabbing files, getting everything prepared for you, being your file, drawer, if you will, so that you come into your office, it's clear of clutter, and essentially your executive assistant is organizing your day, your week, your calendar, everything about you. Eventually, what will happen is you will become to mind meld with your executive assistant, and he or she will be able to anticipate what you need before you even know that you need it. I first started out as Phil's executive assistant, and we mind melded so much that there's times where I would have things in a file for things that I knew he was working on that he didn't even know we had or that he was going to need in order to work on that. And it helped him, or he would sit there and go, by the way, did you pull that? It's already in the file. Okay, thank you. And I'm already anticipating, a good executive assistant's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead of you to anticipate your needs before you even know that you need it. And that's going to make your life so much more easy, and it's going to make it so much less stressful. And the other thing is that I want to make a point here that the executive assistant, their task with essentially keeping you organized and on task and supporting your needs. That is a fundamental priority and job role of them. Therefore, they cannot have other tasks in the firm that also require their priority. I've seen attorneys try to dual hat this role, an executive assistant with an office manager. Well, the problem with that is the executive assistant's boss is the lawyer, right? Their priority is the lawyer. But theoretically, especially when you see it laid out on an organizational chart, you will see that the office manager, the director of operations role, their priority is the firm and everybody else that needs their support and help to ensure that the firm is operating well. And that's really two different things. And so oftentimes those roles can certainly be worn by the same person until it can't, and maybe the operation's too big. You need to now do a series of mitosis and break off and make it two separate roles, right? Same with marketing. A lot of times I'll have attorneys want their executive assistant to be in charge of marketing. And again, it can be very difficult when their priority is to fill up the calendar and to work on the seminars and facilitate the seminars and be away at the seminars and all this and that. And then really they're supposed to be supporting you and anticipating your needs, right? And serving as basically a gatekeeper to you. So it's not a role that I recommend having being, where they have multiple bosses. Definitely also don't recommend typically for them to support multiple attorneys because again, they have too many bosses to report to, and how do they prioritize who's more important than the other? And so I will tell you that the attorneys that I've worked with that have put an executive assistant in place, they have come back to me. They have told me how wrong they were before and how they can't imagine living life without one. And so I will promise you, you will begin to reap the benefits. Unfortunately, a lot of attorneys have this kind of old school mentality that they need to hire revenue producing positions. They need to hire associates and paralegals. And unfortunately, in an estate planning practice, that's not the case. In an estate planning practice, it is important that those that can produce revenue, which are the attorneys, sometimes the paralegals, are doing only those tasks that produce revenue. And by downward delegating to an administrative professional, the other tasks that take up their time. So that's what I have for you today. Again, these are the kinds of things that we talk about at our 2-day MBA crash course for estate planning attorneys called The Ultimate Level. So definitely find out more about that on our website at www.ultimateestateplanner.com. If you have not subscribed to our podcast, please make sure that you do so. We are on all major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. And so make sure that you subscribe so that you're notified when a new episode has been published and put out there. I look forward to continuing to help you unlock your practice's potential. Goodbye, everybody.